There is a social disorganization theory that states there is an increase of crime because of the breakdown of social institutions, such as the family or the government. Now, this theory is not without its critics because to some, this social disorganization theory places the blame on the victim. Well, that's just what our report is about, the victim. One victim is a Black African American, and they are not delusional of the framework of injustice. What's happening in Charlotte, it's not just about Charlotte. It's about Tulsa, it's about Cleveland, it's about Baltimore, it's about Ferguson, it's about Dallas, and it's about New York. Not only is it about the unjustified death of Blacks who hold up their hands, they die. They lie on the ground, they die. They sold a cigarette or a CD and they died. On the way being transported to jail, they died. And in the jail cell, they died. Every historian knows that racism exists in the DNA of America. And today we want to talk about the systemized incarceration of Blacks. Because that is the first step for solutions, is to talk about it. That's why we gave you those surveys, to get you to talk about it. Not only you, but we have talked to employees, teachers, politicians, and the police personally, and got them to talk about it. The 44th President of the United States, President Barack Obama, was contacted. Mendel Vaughn, my partner, wrote him a letter to get ideas for more help for love, peace, and fairness for all Americans, Blacks, and policemen. And President Barack Obama gave Mendel the shock of his entire life and wrote him back personally. So President Barack Obama gave some good solutions and advice that helped us for our report, and we will share to you some of those concerns and answers we had in our presentation. Also, in addition to letters and surveys, we will show you interviews with pastors, the American Civil Liberties, the community, KKK cops, Christian cops, and a poet using mass media. I conclude my introduction by defining our sociological imagination best by a quote from an activist and author, James Baldwin, who said, "To be Black in America, to be consciously, relatively conscious, is to be in a rage at all times. This is because we have political leaders who operate a system of social inequality. They will not even acknowledge that racism is in the fabric of our financial institutions, of our school system, and our employment agencies." Sociologists refer to this as social stratification, speaking of the system and inequality in which the people, those in power like former President Nixon, who declared the war on drugs that led to the mass incarceration of Blacks. The sad reality check point that we discovered was that Blacks, who only make up 5% of Americans, yet populate over 37% of our prison systems. This morning, we will show you the rising epidemic of corruption. Also, we will show you some solutions as we report our report entitled The Gateway to Mass Incarceration.
Level of society is using the drugs, but yet our focus is on people of color and poor neighborhoods because it's easier to make those arrests, it's easier to do those convictions because they do not have the resources to fight them. You know, I would say 75% of police officers that I've ran across, they see you as a potential criminal instead of a citizen that needs protecting. Our kids are being stopped just on a random basis because they fit the description.
Well, what's the description?
The description is young Black, young and Black.
Do you think there's a system that benefits the increased incarceration and arrest of people of color?
It has an economic driving force. It is a multi-billion-dollar business, and it all stems from the arrest being made.
wanted to know how predominantly black marijuana arrests were generating revenue. So I went to speak with Ezekiel Edwards, the director of the Criminal Law Reform Project at the American Civil Liberties Union.
How do police departments gain a financial advantage by being very aggressive towards marijuana possession arrests?
Well, first of all, if you're being told to fight a war on drugs and be productive in fighting that war, and you're being given billions of dollars by the federal government to fight that war, you probably have to show something for it.
Mm-hmm.
Marijuana arrests are an easy way to show that they are being productive. They keep arrest numbers high, drug seizures fairly high, and so it is a measure of productivity. And too often, the targets of that kind of money-driven incentives are people of color.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs. Police officer, open the door.
Nixon launched the War on Drugs in 1972, a far-reaching, federally funded program with the aim of reducing the illegal drug trade. America financed costly battles in Mexico and Colombia, while the number of people incarcerated for drug crimes in the U.S. climbed by 1,500% in just 3.5 decades.
I am glad that in this administration we have increased the amount of money for handling the problem of dangerous drugs sevenfold. It will be $600 million this year. More money will be needed in the future. To the extent money can help in meeting the problem of dangerous drugs, it will be available.
Two programs integral to funding the war on drugs are the Justice Assistance Grant and the Community-Oriented Policing Services. Both programs pump money into police precincts that are deemed high-risk drug zones. One of the most important metrics used to measure the risk of these zones is the number of drug arrests. Since 2005, more than $7 billion has been funneled through these programs to police departments, creating an inevitable incentive to make drug arrests, with marijuana being the easiest.
Can you take us through sort of the national statistics of marijuana possession arrests versus race?
So in 2013, the ACLU put out a first-of-its-kind national report looking at marijuana arrests between 2001 and 2010. And what we found first was that during that time period, there were over 8 million marijuana arrests in the United States. Almost 90% were for possession. What we also found was that in 2010, blacks were almost 4 times as likely to be arrested for marijuana possession, despite the fact that whites and blacks use marijuana at comparable rates. And in fact, in some states, they were 6, 7, 8 times as likely to be arrested, and in some counties, 15, 20, 30 times as likely.
We've been following the case of Bernard Noble, who got 13 1/3 years for 2.8 grams. What do you know about that case?
I think the important thing to note about Mr. Noble's case is, as outrageous as it is, it's not an outlier. There are many Bernard Nobles in Louisiana and in fact around the country who are serving 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, life without parole, for nonviolent offenses.
Is the war on drugs racist?
You are far more likely to be stopped, searched, arrested, charged, imprisoned for longer if you are black for drug.
I'm just sort of thinking about the story and like, this dude got 13 years for 2 joints. He has just a really close, tight-knit family, and like they're beautiful people, you know what I mean? It reminds me just the way that we are. I think about how painful and ridiculous it would be to like be separated from you and from our little one.
The case of Bernard Noble is just one example of how the continued prohibition of marijuana, its biased enforcement by police, and aggressive sentencing are all connected by the river of money that flows from the federal and state government under the banner of the war on drugs. When people talk about marijuana as a gateway drug, they're right. It is a gateway, but not to harder drugs. It's a gateway to mass incarceration. Bernard Noble's plea for clemency was eventually denied. He'll be released from prison on August 7th, 2024. He'll be 58 years old.
We have a commercial from your sponsor, the United States Judicial Department. Warning, viewer discretion is advised. This next scene is not considered suitable for family viewing. This video contains the actual death of Eric Gardner committed by the police department in New York City. His death was classified as a homicide, but a grand jury of their political judicial system said they would not bring charges against the police officers in this offense. Like a monopoly game across the nation, police officers have the get out of jail card in their deck of cards of corruption. Therefore, this video may be unsuitable for some students. This content warning serves as an aid to the viewers and classmates' decision on whether or not to keep on watching. It was this video that prompted me to write the President of the United States in search for answers of how we can have fairness, love, and peace again in America.
That's right. When people that's fighting is to walk away? Are you serious? I didn't do nothing. Let go. I didn't sell anything.
He was selling cigarettes.
I did nothing. We sit here the whole time, mind our business. What are you trying to do? Who else you do about that? Sell cigarettes to? To who? Is it my hard way for what? Every time you see me, you mess with me. I'm tired of it. This sounds today.
This guy right here is forcibly trying to lock somebody up for breaking up a fight.
Everybody standing here until I didn't do nothing. I did not sell nothing. Because every time you see me, you want to harass me, you want to stop me, trying to tell cigarette. I'm minding my business, officer. I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time, please leave me alone. Please don't touch me. Don't touch me. Do not touch me. Put your hand behind your back.
Once again, police beating up on people. I look right here. Back up and get on the steps. Okay, back up. All he did was break up a fight. And this is what happens for breaking up a fight.
So this is a copy of the original letter I got from the president I wrote after that occurred. That is one of the reasons why the conscience of America, of Black America, are in a rage all the time. But there is another reason why Black America should be in a rage all the time that has yet to be announced. If you think that this presentation is only about a racial reflection about white police officers killing African Americans all over this nation, or just locking up more black people, or white hate groups and the corrupt politicians keeping us down with the Jim Crow ethics, you are absolutely incorrect. After the assassination of Martin Luther King, the Black Lives Matter should have begun then in our neighborhoods as well as today. After Martin Luther King was assassinated, Black unity seemed to dissipate, and up crept the Crips and the Bloods. This year, Black Lives Matter movement was created to bring awareness to the systematic and chronic disenfranchisement of Black people. The initiative has become a battle cry of Blacks as we face continual injustices perpetuated by people of power. However, the prevalence of Blacks on Black crimes necessitates an expansion of the movement to include addressing perpetual violence against Blacks by Blacks, which is stimulated with the hip-hop, violent rap, thug, and drug sex videos, and what I sometimes call murder music, all of which greatly influences Black Americans to kill and exploit each other for money and drugs. Until black people are willing to address all issues that keep them oppressed, the movement, the Black Lives Matter, although well-intended, will be little more than a fragmented call to action. The president gave me some good advice when I got this letter from him for all Americans to get involved in your community, because every life matters. Let's go back to our communities. That's why I handed out you an instrument of solutions. Let's go back to our communities and build it up and not tear it down. Abby and I did this as we addressed politicians, policemen, college students here on campus with great results. All of these entities got engaged with us for solutions. In our conclusion, we want to present one solution in a poem that was written and performed by my daughter, Miss Kalea Vaughn. A positive solution on a micro-sociological level that she performed in church. And this poem was not only seen in church, but she was given the opportunity to perform this in a statewide competition for Miss Black Texas, and she was the winner. Therefore, it is a privilege to share this solution with all of you here in the classroom at Tarrant County. These are the kind of solutions interactionists love to see. She wants all the thug and drug artists to hear this. She tries hard to get this message out to the young people who she wants to rap about an education instead of thug and drug music produced by Death Row Records and other record companies similar. The name of this poem she performed in church is Dear Hip Hop. It's a message to all the drug violence artists and hip hop stars and their fans.
Don't be making the Please wake up.